45 attendees. Thank you, Jamie, for starting the recording. There are 45 attendees. We have 90 minutes blocked out for our meeting this morning. I have about 20 slides that I will provide a presentation through. That shouldn't take longer than 15 or 20 minutes. That will leave the balance of our time for Q&A. So any questions or comments? We do have 45. So what I would ask is if you could please be mindful of your neighbors that are here in the meeting in terms of the duration of your comments or questions. If you would like to provide them verbally, if you would like to instead pose questions that we can either review in the meeting if we have time or reflect on later, there is in the webinar format a Q&A feature that is enabled. If you look in the menu, if you're on a desktop at the bottom of your screen, there is Q&A. If you click that, you can do that at any time during today's meeting. Any thought that occurs to you during the presentation, I won't pause. I will go through the entire presentation, but if you think of something while I'm speaking, it's okay. Please do enter your question or your comment there. It will be registered in our system and we'll see it on our end. It'll also be captured and saved after our proceedings, so we can look at it after the meeting if we're unable to get to it this morning. You can also identify yourself in that comment or question, the Q&A function, or you can do it anonymously if you're more comfortable doing so. So I think without further ado, I'm just going to scan our attendee list one more time. Right, don't see our council member has joined us yet. All right, in the interest of time, it's 9:05. I'd like to get started. All right, thanks for your patience. Just getting my screen set up here. Great. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our community meeting. We're here to discuss an interim ordinance related to North Sacramento. By way of an agenda for what I will present today, here is a list. Starting out, I'll give introductions so you know who's joining us today on the city side. I'll provide a summary of the origin of this legislation, where it started, and how we got to today. I'll describe the planning issue that the ordinance is attempting to address. I'll then get into the detail of what is the ordinance, what does it specifically require. And from there, we'll have a Q&A session essentially. So you can ask questions, comments on myself. I'll stop the screen share and I'll provide instructions again about how to participate via Zoom. Once we've gotten through all of our Q&A, I'll describe next steps at the very end of the meeting. All right, so joining us today is myself. I'm Kevin Collin. I am the zoning administrator for the city of Sacramento. I'm the lead for this project. I'm supported today by Jamie Mosler, an associate planner. She's working behind the scenes in the Zoom software. And I have Greg Sandlin, our planning director, who has also joined us today. We don't yet see our legislative sponsor, Councilmember Lololi, in the attendee list. Perhaps he'll join us later. That's why he's in the introductions. All right, so how did this start? In August 2021, a log request was made. This, for staff, relates to a legislative proposal system that the City Council has created for themselves, whereby new ideas for new laws may be presented and considered for work by staff and subsequent hearings and adoption. Back in August of 2021, District 2 made a log request that I've summarized on the screen here to present to council research on historical land use and zoning decisions that negatively impact the North Sacramento community, present the history of the annexation of North Sacramento. Back at that point in time, we had a very broad scope of concern that subsequently in the additional dates was noted in reviewing the request, and basically a narrowing of the focus between August 2021 to June in checking in with the District 2 staff and council member. to August of 2022, more recently, we narrowed a series of concerns that were related to land use incompatibilities. And then in March of this year, in coordination with the council member's office, we received direction to prepare an interim ordinance, which I will describe for you this morning. What led up to the drafting of the ordinance? I'd like to explain what does it mean by land use incompatibilities? In contemplating the scope of the ordinance, the issues that were to be addressed, staff conducted a research of development activity that was occurring within the area of concern. That's what you see on the slide here. You see purple and yellow areas. Purple are industrial areas, yellow are residential areas. You also see different colored icons that are indicating development projects at various stages of in process, approved, withdrawn. For example, these are industrial land uses that were receiving approval or being processed at the city. And we wanted to identify, is there any trend that is happening with these? And we did note that there is, in the last 5 years, there has been an interest in certain industrial uses that rely on trucks in the North Sacramento area, as you can see with those little icons plotted across the map. In the purple areas, which is the industrial zone properties. The red line denotes the area that the ordinance is proposed to apply to. In looking at this data, there's another layer that to staff indicated there might be an issue with regard to compatibility from a land use perspective. And in this slide, there's a very subtle difference between the previous, where these areas with dashed red rectangles, you might notice that there is a darker shade of purple. That indicates that there are residential uses on an industrially zoned property. So that is, in many instances, a home where a family or a residential use is occurring. And if you note from the icons, those different colored icons, there are projects that are occurring essentially next door to these homes. Now, what does that look like beyond the colors on the map? To get a sense about how, from an overhead view on this aerial, just for illustrative purposes, I've identified what this type of land use that relies on commercial trucks looks like from an overhead view, where in this instance, we have essentially a truck trailer storage business on Dry Creek Road that is essentially a paved lot. And then to the north or the top of the slide, you will see there are a series of homes, which indicate legal non-conforming residential uses where you have in basically expansion and not necessarily the best neighbor if you were thinking about compatibility from the standpoint of noise, from odors, or even air quality. That's a little concerning to have those two uses next door, such close proximity. Now, looking beyond that adjacency issue, another aspect that occurred to us in looking at these two land uses next to each other is that for the industrial uses reliant on trucks to conduct business, that those trucks need to travel out into the community to deliver goods, to transport, and that is occurring in a roadway network which is known to be deficient. In the slide here, I've shown Santa Ana Avenue, where you see essentially a paved surface. This is not a complete street in the basic sense of engineering, that it lacks curb, gutter, sidewalk, lighting, and perhaps landscaping. And that presents challenges with regard to the users of that space and the safety and the adequacy of that road to support all land uses. In the slide here, you'll see there is a little monument sign for a church that's located to the left. And then you see trailers parked to the right. And then further down the road, you see from the street view, a perspective of a home and those truck trailer reliant uses to the right for a property that's on the market. So thinking about what we're observing in permit activity, what's on the ground, what issues might be rising up for us to be concerned about. We then reflected on what is the current regulatory scheme, what rules apply to these industrial uses. So what the icons on the map are different land use categories in the city's zoning code. And those uses of contractor storage yard, trucking terminal yard, heavy truck sales, storage, rental, or service and repair, and warehouse distribution center, they're all allowed to locate in the M1, M1S, M2, and MT zones, which are industrial zones, which were denoted in purple on the slide I showed previously. In looking at our code, to develop a property for these uses requires a site plan and design review application. That permit is for architectural purposes only. These uses are currently allowed by right. What that means is that they are presumed to be appropriately located in these zoning districts. And the extent of regulation that is afforded to the city currently is for aesthetic purposes only. The use, the business may operate is not subject to regulation. Broadening the scope from what our current regulations are, there is, if you're not aware, very shortly the city will have a new general plan, the 2040 general plan. This is a mandatory policy document in the state of California for every city and county. It's the Constitution that guides development in every city and county. And there is a new concept that has emerged through a state law, SB 1000, that relates to environmental justice. If you were to review the general plan, you'll see there is an environmental justice element, and it is based upon a lot of analysis of data that in this slide I'm showing pertains to designated disadvantaged communities. These are mapped in accordance with SB 1000, and these areas are, as I've indicated on the slide, pursuant to California's Health and Safety Code, a low-income area that is disproportionately affected by environmental pollution and other hazards that can lead to negative health effects, exposure, and environmental degradation. That area illustrated in red covers some, but not all of the area designated. A lot, I would say, much of the ordinance area that has been illustrated. Our new general plan that we do expect will be in front of council for adoption early next year in February includes the environmental justice element that I described and a series of policies. And in considering the issues that were identified by the council member for District 2 and how that might relate to the planning that's currently underway, there is in our review a policy that specifically speaks to environmental justice and potential incompatibilities. This is policy EJA5. What the policy directs is that the city shall develop zoning standards applicable to new and existing industrial and manufacturing developments to minimize or avoid adverse effects related to air quality, noise, and safety on sensitive populations in disadvantaged communities and other areas of the city where industrial manufacturing uses are near residential uses, such as the Robla neighborhood. That Robla neighborhood is consistent with the ordinance that is presented. I want to next transition to a description of what is an interim ordinance. I think it's important to understand this particular term or jargon and characterize it in terms of what does that mean to have an ordinance. Cities and counties pass ordinances all the time that enact new rules or laws that in many instances are permanent. The city of Sacramento has a different or an additional type of ordinance which is called an interim ordinance that thinking about the general plan and the policy direction and what is the issue presented by District 2, what we have in an interim ordinance is essentially a bridge between a point A and a point B. It is a provision in city code that allows the council to adopt an additional or alternative process, rule, regulation, or requirement, or prohibitions on any permits or uses that are subject to of a contemplated general plan that the city council or the planning agency is considering or studying or intends to consider or study within a reasonable time. So given that we do have a general plan that has begun the study and has a policy directing the further study of an environmental justice issue in the north area of Sacramento, for example, the interim ordinance is envisioned to be a temporary measure between the adoption of the general plan and the full implementation of the policy that I've illustrated. Next, I'd like to describe this interim ordinance. If adopted, what would it specifically require? It would require a commission level conditional use permit. I do want to describe a commission level permit means the city's planning and design commission, which is distinguished from lower levels of review that would include a director level review by myself, the zoning administrator. The commission level review would apply to land uses of contractor storage yard, terminal trucking terminal yard, tractor or heavy truck sales, storage rental, the same for service and repair, as well as warehouse center distribution land uses, when all of the following conditions are met. When these uses are located in the zoning districts that were illustrated in purple on the previous slides, when they are located within the boundary area that was illustrated in red, that is the city limits to the northeast and east, Arden Way on the south, and Steelhead Creek on the west. Additionally, when these uses are located within 1,000 feet of any residentially zoned property or existing residential use, a K through 12 school, a child care center, a medical clinic or office, or senior housing. Again, all of these conditions need to be met for the commission level CUP to be required. I'm going to clarify in a few moments when we get to the Q&A who exactly needs to apply for this permit. So please know that. When we get to the Q&A, I'm going to go through a few example questions here in a moment. I'd like to give some instructions about how to participate in Zoom. If you're online, first click the reactions, then raise your hand. What that does is it gives us a clue on our end that you'd like to speak, and we will unmute your microphone so you can do so. If you're joining us on a mobile app, please click the More tab and then raise your hand. That will do the same and let us know you'd like to speak. If you're a call-in user, I'd ask that you please press *9 to raise your hand and then *6 to unmute or mute. Okay, with those instructions, there have been a few common themes that I've noticed in correspondence to date that I think might get at some of the questions that'll come up this morning. This meeting was advertised to every property owner within the ordinance boundaries that is industrially zoned. That's over 1,000 parcels that received a notice in the mail of this meeting. If you are an existing business owner, I want to first address a question that's come up from a few of you, and that is, if the ordinance applies and I have an existing business, what does that mean? It means you have what our city code calls a deemed CUP. What is a deemed CUP? That would apply to all of the uses that I've listed previously. In city code, what that means is that if you have lawfully established your business, when this ordinance is passed, you are deemed to have an approved conditional use permit. That means you do not need to apply for a new one. You may continue to conduct your business operations yesterday and into the future indefinitely without applying for a permit. Another question that's come up is, if the ordinance is passed and I change my business, what does that mean? What, if anything, do I need to do? In our jargon as planners and in city code, this is termed a modification. When a business is changed under city code, there's a series of questions that we would ask. There is a classification of what is a major or a minor change. I want to clarify this is specific to every business that has a deemed CUP. If you have a deemed CUP and you, for example, are changing your business to increase the size, you make the building taller, wider, longer, you buy a parcel next door, you expand your business, you'd like to do so, you would approach the city and say, I'd like to, I'm changing my business, I'd like to inquire about a modification. That will lead us to a series of questions about, is it a major or a minor change to your business? And how does that relate to the deemed CUP? For a major modification to the CUP, there are 4 basic tests that the city code provides that we will walk a customer through. If any of these are met in the determination of staff, then a major change modification is required. So if the pattern or volume of traffic flow, either on or off any property covered by the permit, is major, and it is a major change that would trigger the requirement. Any change in the nature of the use, the density provision would not apply, or any material changes in the orientation or location of structures on the parcel. Any of those criteria would trigger a major change, which would lead to public notice, a public hearing, and zoning administrator review, which is different from the provision for new businesses, entirely new businesses being developed that require a commission level permit. This is a lower level of review at the director level. Finally, what does it mean to be a minor modification? That's anything not classified as major. If you are a minor modification, that needs no notice, no hearing, and that is a staff level review. All right, with that, I am done with the presentation. I appreciate your patience. I see a number of questions have come in through the Q&A. We're at 9:26. If we have any folks that, just a moment. I see a few calling users. Just as a reminder, press *9 to raise your hand or *6 to unmute. All right. At this point, we'll move to Q&A. I see a couple hands raised. Hi, Deborah. You beat me to it. Go for it.
Well, there are several things going on. There's a big piece of property across the street from my house. It is at 5041 Santa Ana Avenue. And it also has a sign for development out on Raleigh Boulevard. They brought over between 800 and 1,000 bottom dump trucks in and are trying to fill up a creek area that is a natural habitat. It's like one of the only natural habitats left in the area. It is an environmentally, it will not be safe to be along that creek. And I'm worried about flooding. I'm worried about all of our houses flooding.
Thank you, Deborah. I believe we spoke earlier on the phone, if I recall correctly. I recognize your name in the concern raised.
Okay, and also the speeding trucks that go down my road, they've torn my road up so bad. My road is Santa Ana, and actually you were right in front of my house with the picture. And the trucks are turning around in driveways and tearing up people's yards. It's just, and they're worried. A person across the street from me, he's at work right now, couldn't come to the meeting. He had water come all the way up to his back patio last year, and they started filling it in last year. So several of us on the street are very concerned about it. And they couldn't come to the meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Deborah. It sounds like you have property specific concerns. If you'd like to contact me separately and have those addressed, I'd be happy to help you with that. And I do note your comment about speeding on the streets. Thanks.
Okay, and what about the not having permits? All these truckers that don't have permits, what's going to happen with them? That's what okay,
I hear your concern. To address them, that would require staff to evaluate the the properties specifically to determine whether any permits have been issued, and if not, whether enforcement should proceed. So this isn't the venue to get answers to those specific questions. We're here to discuss the ordinance that is proposed for consideration by council here shortly. So,
Okay, well, I was
yes.
just saying I'm opposed to them
Okay.
doing any of it. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I hear you. Thanks for joining. I do appreciate the comments, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, I see 4 more hands raised. Matt Osofsky, hopefully I pronounced that right. I have clicked allow to unmute.
Did you want to protect it with our damage waiver or go with your own?
Hello.
Good
I'm
morning.
here.
Good morning, Matt. I can hear you.
Great. So I had a couple questions. First, these properties, why were they allowed to be built this close to industrial zoning? It's kind of like building a house next to the airport and complaining about the airplanes. It's why we put industrial way out in the middle of nowhere, right? So it doesn't bother people. And then if houses encroach on that area, of course, aren't houses going to be in the way of industrial?
Okay.
All right, question number 1. If trucks can't park in residential neighborhoods by law, they're not allowed to park in commercial lots anymore, like Walmart, like they used to be, to take their naps per the Department of Transportation regulations. They're not allowed to park on freeway on-ramp and off-ramps anymore per our city ordinances. So once you start reducing these lots based on these conditional use permits, where are they going to go? And that's going to further reduce our truck operators, which is going to further harm our national logistics industry, thus increase costs for everything, which people aren't going to like. So that's a question. I need you guys to answer that. So then you also said if there's a daycare or childcare center within 1,000, you guys need to update your slide. It just says 1,000. I think you mean feet. Then it requires a conditional use permit. So for someone to open a daycare, they're just at a house with a random license. It could be 6 kids. So they could essentially just chase all these truck centers out of business by opening up a childcare wherever they want. So you guys might need to update that law with a childcare center, what that actually entails, whether it's, a commercial childcare center, but an at-home childcare center, that's just somebody's house. And then it sounds like CHP and sheriff need to enforce laws on Santa Ana for Deborah's complaint rather than changing ordinances. Seems like a lot of these could be dealt with just handing out some speeding tickets and turning around in residential lot tickets, that kind of thing. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate your comments this morning. So I think what I'd like to respond to first, you asked why were the homes allowed to be built there at all? A facet of environmental justice is that it is speaking to history, and that there is a history that we are noticing in the community, that there is currently homes that exist in industrial zones. That is reflective of a permitting practice that happened previously. There was back in 1961, there was the first zoning adopted in the city of North Sacramento, which is not the city of Sacramento. So there was a previous jurisdiction that authorized development in this activity in an annexation that subsequently occurred 3 years later in 1964. Those development patterns exist for better or for worse, or somewhere in between. And the issues that have been created are, we cannot undo them without significant effort. They're there now. So what's the balance between the two? Housing is very important from a policy perspective as well as supporting business. So I think the challenge that staff observes is the balance between the two, and the interim ordinance attempts to do so. That's why they're there. They can't be removed instantaneously. So over time, the intent is to essentially reduce harm, to have less harm and better compatibility between these uses. All right, I see a few more hands raised. Thanks for your patience. Jeff Kavarme, I'm sorry if I've not pronounced your name correctly. I think we've corresponded prior to today. Thanks for joining us.
That's correct. Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
So we've spoken a number of times, and I think, most of the industrial property owners that I work with would agree that, what you're trying to do as far as limiting trucking through the neighborhoods is a valid cause. But those I represent generally own concrete tilt-up warehouses along Pell Drive or Raleigh Boulevard with direct access to and from the freeway via approved truck routes, and yet there's no distinction between those properties and the ones you're describing that are intermixed with residential west of Raleigh Boulevard. And, I guess if that's the issue you're trying to target, why not exempt those that have been there historically, that only have trucks that go from their property along Pell Drive or Raleigh Boulevard to the freeway?
Comment noted. Would you like a response, or did you have additional comments or questions?
I do have additional questions. Yeah, one other. I'm just curious whether any air pollution or traffic studies have been done that support the implementation of this ordinance. And I ask because your figure 7 in your presentation covers city districts with the worst air pollution, yet seemingly fails to demonstrate a cause and effect relationship or even a correlation between trucking, industrial, and air pollution. The 3 areas with the highest air pollution have the lowest prevalence of industrial, and there's nearly no industrial in the Meadowview area on that map. And city's largest industrial submarket, Power Inn, is conspicuously not included as a high air pollution district, which also raises serious concerns and doubts as to whether this is the real issue that needs to be addressed. So I'm wondering if you guys have dug in on that or done any noise or traffic studies that would indicate, trucking through the neighborhoods has led to increased traffic incidents.
Thanks. Would you like me to respond to those 2 points at this point?
Absolutely.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm seeing only a couple additional hands raised, so we do have 54 attendees, and so I'm being a little bit flexible here with keeping the dialogue going, the back and forth. So so the comment about truck routes is duly noted. That is something that staff will be looking at and evaluating further. I do have, and previous to today's meeting, did review the map of designated truck routes, and there are no city truck routes, local city truck routes that are designated within the ordinance boundaries. What there are some federally designated STAA routes, which are surface transportation routes for the very large, the longest trucks that are designated. And so, as you've indicated, Pell Drive, Maine, there is a clear route through that park, industrial park, to the Interstate 80, and Raleigh is the other route that is designated for federal purposes. There is not there are no routes that are east-west that connect through the neighborhood. So I think what we'll do after our community news is look into that further and see what our thoughts are in terms of that's implication in the boundary drawn. In terms of air pollution, I wouldn't say it's the sole driver. I think that the mapping of disadvantaged communities, that there are, as the slide indicated, there are other environmental effects that we at staff observe could be present with with an industrial land use that is heavily relying on trucks to be a neighbor to a home, as that you have air quality, but you also have noise, and that we're not looking at studying to see that there is in fact a deleterious impact for adoption of this ordinance. It is an interim ordinance. It is intended to not prohibit any particular business, but to provide an additional layer of regulatory oversight through a conditional use permit that would enable the evaluation of the operations of a business that is not currently allowed for under current city code. So when we look at air and noise, we would consider is the impact of a very large facility of hundreds of trucks or less than that? What is it we would measure that through a discretionary permit process and typically through the California Environmental Quality Act on a project by project basis. So this is an attempt to adopt an interim ordinance to provide an additional level of oversight to address those issues on a project by project basis in the interim when that EJ policy for the whole city is evaluated and implemented. Additionally, the safety aspects of this, I don't, in terms of looking at incidents, we're not looking at identifying a number of crashes. I think it's clear to us at staff that a roadway that just simply lacks sidewalks is not a safe environment for these for pedestrians, bicyclists, and large trucks to interact in. We think it's reasonable to conclude that's not a complete street and that it wouldn't be safe for those users to interact in. So I think those are my thoughts on that. Did you have any final thoughts, Jeff? I see a number of other hands raised.
No, I mean, what I heard was there have been no studies conducted, and there's no evidence for this. And it seems that there should be if you're going to impact as many industrial property owners as you are.
Yeah, I'm duly noted. I hear your concern. Thanks for joining us today. Next, I see Sarah Mojahard.
Yes, hello, Kevin.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I would like to appreciate city's concern about the residential, basically the residential properties in the area. However, I would like to say that any restriction in any zoning, basically after the fact, it will affect any industrial property owners, and that's not fair to them. So if I purchase a property basically with the knowledge of that it's zoned for a certain purpose, and then we put restriction on it, well, I understand that like whoever that is running business, they are going to be permitted after the fact, but it will affect the value of the property. Now, I understand that it's not fair to the residential, so definitely we have to have a speed bumps or like do whatever way we can basically control this traffic, but that really doesn't make any sense that, okay, if we have this problem, let's completely, I don't know how to say that. It's like raising the question. So we're not going to let them be there, but they were there at first, or they were there at the same time. And the other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention and everybody's attention, when we are running these people out, these businesses out with basically more zoning and more zoning restrictions, what happens is that we're going to have vacancies and we're going to have abandoned property. So let's think about it. Now, if this loss, let's say there is a trucking company renting a place. Now they leave. Now we have this vacant lot. What's going to attract? Unfortunately, the homelessness issue, I shouldn't call it issue, it's a problem actually. And I do have I am a part of property owners in Santa Ana Avenue, and I would like to share an experience with the city and with everybody that is hearing us. So we've been there for a few years, and we've been there like for 5-6 years. And we started having homeless camps and trucks coming to the street around 2-3 years ago. And trust me, we are all human, we are all equal. I don't have any problem with like any individual, and this is very sad that some of us needs to live like that. But what I don't like is to have garbage all over the place. What I don't like is be walking around people under influence, under heavy drugs and all that. And I don't think anyone would like to come out of a street, come out of their home like the residential people. And here we are looking at a camper, garbage all over the street, and we call city, and like what city can do, there are too many of them. Anyway, we had this experience around a year ago. One of them, and trust me, I'm not affiliated with any trucking company either, but like there was a trucking company coming to industrial, to Rayleigh's industrial park. And since then, I mean, I love them to park their trucks on the street, so it doesn't let other people to come and just like make the place like a, you know, like a, not like a place of business and not like a place of living. So these are my concerns, and like, I mean, there are a lot to say, and I would like to like let other people speak. And sorry, I got a little bit like, you know, like my voice and all that, but I'm 100% against any restriction in the zoning. And I appreciate if you could do something. Okay, if we need more sidewalk, let's go ahead. Let's see what we can do. Let's keep the businesses in the area. Let them generate income for the city. And we use that tax money to build our city together. I think that's a better solution than just like, okay, you go, and then we're gonna end up with abandoned properties.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us and offering those
Thank you.
comments.
Yeah, thank you for letting
Yeah,
me.
you're very welcome. Take care. Okay, next I see Zar Antalov. Again, apologies if I mispronounce your name.
Hi, Kevin. Good morning. Could you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Good morning. Thanks for
Kevin,
joining.
hi. You probably know me, like I represent many architectural firms. So we have a situation that one of our customers got the permit and spent over $3 million building some kind of trucking station at 1500 Main Avenue. They got all the permits, everything was approved. And after spending $3 million and creating over 20 working spaces, okay, paying taxes and everything else, they concerned that new rule that you're going to implement might take them out of business. They're located next to school. They're located next to the residential areas, and that was concerned, but everything was approved. So my question will be, how the city going to protect those owners who just recently got the permit, spent over $3 million for construction and permits, and now forced to comply with the new requirements that financially they might not be able to do that?
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the question. If I'm understanding you correctly, you are speaking to a development that has received a permit. If that is the case, if the permit has been issued, then there is no additional requirements. This ordinance would not apply. That would fall under the deemed CUP. So if that permit is executed, that business is constructed and operating, it is considered lawfully established and not subject to a new CUP requirement, is granted a deemed CUP.
Understood. So if I understood you correctly, since they already completed construction, so new requirement that you're going to develop will basically not impact that specific business, correct?
That is correct. That is granted a deemed CUP. If that business were modified, the modification I described, if the business were enlarged, the building were made taller, wider, longer, or the area of the lot were made larger, that would be potentially subject to a minor or a major modification to that deemed CUP, but no additional requirements based on what I'm understanding. Your description would be imposed for the ordinance for that particular example.
Okay, so when you mentioned that, I apologize for one more question. So
Okay.
does the city going to send some sort of the documentation to that specific owner, or owner shall approach the city and obtain that waiver for the no changes will be impacted that business?
Yeah, no waiver or permit would be necessary to verify that. What if anything I would recommend is that business that you've described, that they obtain a business operating tax certificate. That's commonly known as a business license. It's required for taxation purposes. It's mandatory for every business within the city limits that be obtained. That your client obtain the business operating tax certificate to verify that they are operating. That's a record that city planners often refer to verify that a business is operating and that it is active in the city. So that would be my advice for a record to demonstrate that you have a deemed CUP and that it was established and is operating.
And what's the DMC PUVs?
Say that again.
DMC PUV. What's that DMC PUV?
I'm not sure that I follow.
You just mentioned like a
Oh.
DMC PUV. What's that?
A deemed CUP, a deemed conditional use permit.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for joining. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Ross Talbert, I see your hand raised. Clicking to unmute you.
Yes, hi, good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
Yes, so I guess my question for you is, what's the time of a CUP process right now in the city of Sacramento? And what I see and what you're proposing basically destroys any ability for a current industrial user to use this sort of process, because in the past, I've seen this process is very, very lengthy. It is very time consuming and very expensive, as we just heard from an architect. There's a lot of different things involved here. And it appears to me that the city, I mean, you look at these, you know, I'm born and raised here in Sacramento, Kevin. You know, you look at McClellan was built in 1935. All of these industrial parks, if you look at the Raleigh Industrial Park, that came from McClellan, from that air park. That's been here for years. You look at the Norwood Industrial Park, you look at the Pell Industrial Park. These are places that were built and allowed by the city for many, many years. But yet it appears, due to the city's neglect, they have not supported the industrial parks with access, with zones, with things. You look at the streets and look at what has been allowed. And so now what it appears you're trying to do is you're trying to solve an issue that you've created on the backs of the industrial owners who have spent millions of dollars to purchase property, to invest, to bring business, to bring tax dollars to Sacramento. And that is just something that is, you know, to me, not acceptable. And you, as the city, should be looking at ways to work and enhance this, you know, improve roads, provide safer environments for the residential areas in these zones, but yet not penalize, you know, existing industrial owners. You know, a CUP process, I understand, takes a year. Typically, if I'm going to put a business in one of our properties, or a year or more for a CUP process, if I put, and which is going to destroy new business, going to destroy owners, it's going to reduce value, as it's already been mentioned today, to property owners. Every time you change use or reduce use, you affect property and affect areas in a negative manner. I've seen this all over the city. I've seen this in the county, see this in every other jurisdiction I've worked in throughout the years. And so you're going to damage actually the residential properties because you're reducing value for the commercial zone in that area. So I would just say, what's the time frame for a CUP? What's the typical time frame? And has the city looked at possibly, you know, adjusting this map from this red area to already kind of already established industrial zones that are heavy industrial now, like the Pell Industrial Park or Norwood Industrial Park or part of the Raleigh Industrial Park, and removing those from this sort of interim ordinance?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Ross. I appreciate your comments and the questions. Let's see, the first, in terms of the CUP process, assuming we're talking about a new business, a new ground up development, that would require a commission level conditional use permit. That process is currently approximately, I would say, a minimum of 4 to 6 months. It could extend longer. It is an iterative process between an applicant and staff to process that application and get it through our system. So that's a time frame estimate. The cost of filing that application is just over $14,000. Additionally, just wanted to share that bit of info for you. And then in terms of, you asked about adjusting the map, is that my response is that we're conducting these meetings. We had a meeting yesterday and we have a community meeting today where we are going to hear from the community first before any modifications are made to the ordinance, if any. So if you're interested to stay in contact and understand any evolution in the thinking of staff, and including from the council member who's the sponsor, I'd encourage you to retain my contact info and stay in touch, and we can keep you updated. I'll speak to our next steps here shortly in terms of when the ordinance would go to council. So, but thanks again.
So question this, you've mentioned 3 to 4 months for a CUP in the city of Sacramento.
I said 4 to 6.
4 to 6. That's not what I'm seeing in real life. And so that's kind of where I'm a bit, that's not what I'm seeing in the actual world. And I think that's not accurate. I'm just being honest with you. And so when I see it in the real world is much longer than a lengthy time frame, which kills deals, which kills people's ability to develop or people's ability to bring new business to an area, or existing business if they need to expand or adjust. So that's I think what you're saying, 4 to 5 months, is very not what I'm seeing in the industry right now.
I appreciate that. That would not be universally true. It's not uniform. There are variations between applications. Again, it's an iterative process. So I hear you and appreciate you sharing your experience. It's duly noted. Thanks again, Ross. I do see a number of other hands raised. Before I get there, I want to first, there are a few in the Q&A. There are a few questions that I think I could reply to. First, can you make your presentation available by email or otherwise? Yes, we can. If you found this meeting, that means you probably have my email address. I'll share it at the end of the meeting, at the very end today, and share it for all of you again in case you don't have it. You can email me and request a copy, and we'll make sure to give you access to that. Another question that I see in the Q&A is, would a deemed CUP be grandfathered in the sale of a business? That's a good question. The deemed CUP runs with the land. It does not run with the business owner. So if you are deciding to retire or move on or sell your business for whatever reason to another person, and they want to conduct your same business literally, or if it's the same land use activity, there is no compromise or expiration of the deemed CUP. It runs with the land. So the owner of the property is irrelevant in this instance. It is the land use activity that's occurring. Okay. I see a next hand raised, Kay Ramos. I'm going to click allow to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Kevin. Thank you for walking us through this morning, and thanks to the council members for supporting having this outreach. I think we all tend to agree this is a noble cause, what you guys are trying to do here, and we're all empathetic to the impacts we have as operators of these type of properties. But I think, you guys need to think about this. This is a significant change you're proposing. And maybe I don't understand it all, so maybe your questions can help me get a little more comfortable with it so I can have a better understanding. But it kind of feels like you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I think you guys have good intentions, but unfortunately, you're on the verge of some very bad policy because of you just don't understand the industry and the details of the situation. But anyway, with that, I have a couple of questions. One is, and it really wasn't defined, and it was a question earlier. I mean, what defines a state designated disadvantaged area? Is it income? Is it pollution? Is it health? Is it a combination of all those? I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like it would extend beyond to really get into the weeds on that and give a detailed explanation. There would be a whole nother meeting about disadvantaged communities, but it is a combination of factors, as you've indicated, of income and other environmental factors that is prescribed in the Health and Safety Code, is through Senate Bill 1000 that was previously adopted and signed by the governor, that requires the mapping of these areas and subsequent policy planning through the city's general plan to address the environmental justice topic. So if you'd like more info, I can connect you with our long-range planning team about the environmental justice element, the analysis that led to the policies. But if you send me an email, I can get you more info on that. It's just simply too detailed and to get into it at our meeting today.
That's fine. I guess, are we saying that the industrial properties cause these areas to be disadvantaged areas, or they just happen to be in proximity? I'm sure there's some without proximity to industrial, right?
Yeah, it's not it's not limited to land uses. It could be related to other factors such as roadways that have high levels of traffic and emissions from vehicles that are traveling along them as well.
Okay, and is the primary concern here greenhouse gases, traffic, noise? I mean, what, all the above?
Yeah, so it's not greenhouse gases specifically. That's that the slide I showed earlier that summarized what's a disadvantaged community is that there's certain commonalities that they experience related to environmental pollution that is generally termed as adverse air quality, excessive noise levels, or safety concerns such as roadways that are not fully developed to provide for safe travel mobility for all users.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with regards to land uses, do you know, I don't know the answer to this, if the difference between vehicle, trips, VMTs generated between industrial uses, multifamily residential uses, and commercial uses per acre, do you know which one generates the most amount of traffic or pollution?
I heard a couple different couple issues in your comment. VMT, vehicle miles traveled, would be different from air emissions. Typically we speak about and planners talk about those in terms of greenhouse gases and climate change. If you're asking about air emissions and what land use category would emit more, I don't have a general. I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure I fully understand the question. That there could be a lot of nuance to that, but I'd want to be sure to give you an accurate response. But
okay,
again,
but aren't greenhouse gases based upon vehicle trips that a property generates?
No, yeah, no, not limited to that. If I had a general response is that if you look at all of the sources of greenhouse gas emissions that the transportation sector is uniformly is in every instance I've encountered is from the transportation sector.
Transportation sector. So
yeah,
that excludes auto vehicles.
That's all modes of transport.
Yeah. Okay.
Airplanes, cars, trucks, all those things. But yeah,
okay.
So thank you. Thanks for joining us. I should move along.
No, I've got. Wait. I got some more here. I'll make it a little quicker.
Please.
One is, I think your presentation, showing Santa Ana Street or wherever that is. I mean, obviously that's an issue, but that's a lot different than a lot of these developed, master plan business parks with curb, gutter, landscape setbacks, etc. So I think you're comparing apples and apples, and not a fair presentation, not a fair part of the presentation. Now, this is the most important question. In the CUP process, if I own a property and I have multiple tenants in that property, and one of my tenants, let's say it's a 50,000 square foot property, and I have a 5,000 square foot tenant who vacates that property. His lease is up. He needs a bigger space. He goes down the street, leases something else. I now have 5,000 square feet vacant. What is my process? Does my new tenant have to go through a CUP process?
No, the deemed CUP would carry over to that new tenant.
Okay. So what if that space is vacant for a year?
Yeah, there is an expiration of that time frame.
Oh, pretty important issue. How long is that time frame?
Yeah. Hold that thought. I'm going to have to. I believe it's 12 months, but I'm going to need to double check and provide the code section. So I hear I hear your question.
That's fine. So then let's just I'm doing hypothetical. So the space that's vacant for a year, which isn't unrealistic. A new tenant comes in and wants to lease the space. He's now going to have to go through the CUP process. And so that is going to take, based on the earlier comments, 4 to 6 months, $14,000, a public hearing, a notification of neighbors, in a public hearing, correct?
If a new CUP is required, that would be the case, yes.
Okay, for 14,000
But
square foot.
there, yes, but
Or
there, again,
4,000 square foot
okay.
tent. Okay. Okay, no,
Again-
hear me out. Hear me out. Okay.
now, K Ramos, I have 8 other speakers that I have need to get to.
Well, I
And
think
the
the
other-
other speakers would be more than happy
Okay.
to continue,
So,
and maybe they could go into
this is-
Q&A and say, let Ramus continue on the Q&A, because I have some very important questions that you guys don't get.
This will be the final question. I appreciate you joining us,
Okay.
but in the interest of fairness, I do need to allow others to speak and not
I have
presume
no
what their
problem with
interests
that.
are.
I have no problem whatsoever with that, and I would just appreciate the others listening if they'd like me to go on to put it in the Q&A to give me more time. But my next question is, do you guys understand how many buildings or square feet of space that this ordinance is going to impact?
I hear your comment. Thank you, K Ramos. I
You're
hear
not
your
gonna answer
comment.
the question? You don't know how many buildings or how many square feet this is gonna impact or how many tenants? Well, I can answer it for you. It's
What-
about
you-
9 million square feet. It's about 250 buildings. It's probably 700 to 1,000 tenants. Now, if you figure tenants sign a 4-year lease on average, and those leases roll over and people leave, you're gonna have 150 to 200 CUP requests a year. Possibly. Are you guys prepared to handle that volume? Do you have the staffing to do that? Do you realize that implication, I guess, that that's what's gonna happen? I mean, you're throwing zoning out the window. So now you're gonna approve every single use in these areas.
I hear
Anyway,
your
we'll continue
comment
on, let
and-
other people go. I'll come back. I got a whole nother 5 or 6 questions, but continue on.
Thanks for joining us. I appreciate your comments.
I will see the.
All right, next on our list, I see Sandy. Thanks for your patience, Sandy.
Can you hear me?
I can. Thanks for joining.
Okay. You may have already covered this earlier on. I signed in a little late. And my question is, Main Avenue School, close to Raleigh Boulevard, how is that going to impact them? I mean, these huge trucks going down that street, it doesn't seem compatible with all the students going in and out of the school.
Yeah, I understand. I hear your concern. Did you have a question in there, or you just wanted to express that concern?
Yes, I mean, evidently you've considered it. I just want to know what you're planning to do about addressing that situation.
Yeah, so the ordinance is intended to enact a process for conditional use permits to be required for new uses. So I think what I'm hearing is you're addressing existing uses that would not be addressed by the ordinance. That would be perhaps a separate process for the city to address.
So the traffic of the trucks going down that street would not be considered?
The ordinance would apply to new developments. The ordinance doesn't regulate where the roadway itself, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Yeah, it would be the road usage by these huge trucks.
Yeah, there are separate laws that relate to the vehicle code that would pertain to movement within the right of way for vehicles.
Okay, I just wanted to see if this pertained.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for joining. I hear your concern about safety in the roadway and students and how they interface with trucks. I appreciate your comment
I'm her
today.
husband, Charles. Can you hear me?
I can, Charles. Good morning.
I wanted everyone to know that the zoning has been changed a number of times here. It went from farming to light residential to light industrial. Now is it heavy industrial? Is the zoning for heavy industrial?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
In other words, the zoning of the area that you're talking about, the areas that you're talking about, like here in Robla, for instance, it has gone from farming to light residential to light industrial. Now, I just heard a minute ago where it may be heavy industrial. Is that true?
No, I can't answer that question specifically without referring to a particular piece of property, which we would need to do outside this meeting. If you'd like to understand the zoning for this area of North Sacramento generally, or a particular piece of property, please reach out to me and send an email, or I'll provide my email and phone number on the last slide here in a moment. But yeah, that's a little too specific, or needs more time than we have in our meeting today. I appreciate you joining us though. Thanks, Charles.
What about this trucking, parking? It deals with trucking, right? Parking.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question, sir. I'm gonna need to move
Well,
on.
in other words, you're trying to make it so that these properties have to have, like, for instance, paved acreage so that they can park their truck there. They can't come along and just put trucks on bare land.
Yeah, there's a little bit more to it. I'd be happy to revisit the presentation with you separately. It sounds like there were some bits that you may have misunderstood or not heard earlier. So I'd be happy to get into that, but in a separate conversation, Charles. But I do need to move on to other speakers to ensure we have enough time for everyone. Thank you. Nick Abdus, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. Appreciate the time this morning. So I'm here today on behalf of Jensen Precast. I just had some follow-up questions, and I want to thank Kevin Ramos for his questions. I thought those were very valid. But in terms of the big picture here, can you give me a sense if staff had talked about maybe maybe a less restrictive approach? This seems like a one-size-fits-all to all properties within this pretty large area. Did staff look at anything a little less restrictive? And let me just say this, and I will say, I know there is a zoning code update, right? A lot of these issues relative to incompatible uses and kind of standards for that could be addressed through that process. And then certainly as it relates to, I think, the site plan and design review that you had mentioned earlier, I know you said it was purely architectural, but it also does impact the site development, right? There are site development standards relative to internal circulation, what type of surface. You can't park trucks on dirt, you obviously, or gravel. You have to pave it. That all has to go through a city approval process. So it's not merely architectural in that sense. Obviously, screening requirements relative to noise. I mean, obviously these operations have to abide by the noise ordinance. And if there's issues relative to the noise ordinance being insufficient, I mean, certainly there can be a discussion around that. Relative to the street impacts, I saw that Santa Ana picture. I mean, that's a horrible condition, but is that in Public Works roadway CIP? Is that roadway section? I mean, obviously monies go into fixing roads, and obviously not enough money to fix all roads, but areas that are prioritized by Public Works can utilize, obviously, that mechanism. I guess my overall concern is that this is a significant regulatory burden. Speaking on behalf of an existing property owner, I mean, certainly I appreciate, the distinction between major and minor, but in terms of what process you'd have to go to subsequent to having an existing business operation and then wanting to expand it. But nevertheless, it's still, a discretionary process. You do still have to comply with CEQA, certainly, but you have that today, because if you if you're developing an undeveloped site, you're processing a grading permit, you're doing civil improvement plans, you move over, I want to say what the threshold, 250 cubic yards in the city, that triggers CEQA. So I guess I threw a lot at you, but the concern is is this the right vehicle to address the issues that you've articulated? Because I'm not clear that a use permit would in essence protect or solve or make better any of the issues that you said. What the effect is going to be was what Mr. Ramos said, which is folks are gonna, I mean, tenants are going to move, businesses are going to move in and out, and at some point you're processing a new use permit for, you know, for an existing facility, and they might not do it because the cost is not, it's going to be much more than 15,000. I mean, if you look at, you got to go through a commission level review. You obviously have to pay the planning fees. You have to pay your consultants to put together the site plan and design review plans. You're going to have to pay a sequent consultant because you're probably going to do a neg deck or something thereabouts. Hell, maybe you might even trigger an EIR, in which case all bets are off and you're into the six figures, you know? So it's a little, I mean, I think these are all important questions that really kind of beg the question, is this the right mechanism to address the problems that you have articulated as the basis for this zoning code amendment?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, that was a lot. I'll acknowledge that. And I heard a lot of different topics raised and the concerns, you know, about the overall idea of the ordinance. And yeah, what I would say is that I hear your concerns. There are a variety of concerns or opinions about the merits of the ordinance. What if I could take it back to the origin of this legislation is that we're working in partnership with the council member's office to advance legislation as requested by that office, and that will eventually conclude at a hearing before the city council. So the council will be the ultimate judge. A majority of them will be the ultimate judge as to whether or not this ordinance has merit and to proceed. And should it be passed as presented or changed, that will be the ultimate. I think perhaps you know that based on experience, but.
And I will be submitting a letter, no
Yeah.
doubt. I don't expect answers to all those questions because I have a lot more. Is Council Member Laloy on? Did he come on? I'd sure love to hear anything he or his office has to say about his perspective as to why he wanted to kick off something like this in terms of amending the zoning code along these lines.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through. I'm not seeing him being able to join or his staff this morning. He joined last night. So
Okay.
yeah, that's
All right.
Thank you for joining. Appreciate it, Nick.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah. Next, a hand raised I see is Eric.
Yeah, good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
So I'm a property owner over in the Pell Industrial Park, and it seems to me that you guys have a very specific issue over on Raleigh that you're trying to solve here, where you've got residential properties that are built on industrial zoned property that are backing up to actual industrial use properties, and somehow, you know, other areas are being looped into this at the same time. You know, you specifically mentioned that there are streets in that area that don't have curbs, gutters, are not, you know, suitable for commercial traffic, which in that case, my question would be, are those streets connecting to these industrial properties, or are these streets that are being just used by commercial companies?
I'm trying to understand the question. Are you speaking to Pell or in the Raleigh?
In Raleigh, you said that there are a number of trucks that travel down streets that don't have curbs and gutters. Are those residential streets, or are there properties that are connected to those streets?
So their streets aren't designated for residential or other purposes. I'm referred earlier to, there's a map of designated truck routes. There are no local designated truck routes along the Raleigh corridor. The Raleigh corridor is designated itself only Raleigh for federal purposes for the Surface Transportation Act. Any intersecting roadway that runs east-west is not a designated truck route. However, There are industrial uses that do occur off of there. It does not necessarily mean there's a violation of any land use or zoning code or other ordinance, but they're not designated truck routes currently, if that answers your question.
Got it. Yeah, because it
Yeah.
seems like Pell has been looped into this, even though there are no such streets over in Pell. There are no, on your zoning map where you showed the different shades of purple, there is a single dark shade of purple in Pell that would indicate a residential use on an industrial property. There are no streets over there without curbs and gutters. So that I'm trying to figure out if is what you're trying to do the proper thing to solve the issue. Because if I understood also, you said that any business that is existing on any of these properties will have a deemed conditional use permit. So you showed a picture of a trucking yard that backs up to a couple residential houses. So if I'm understanding correctly, that trucking yard will have a deemed conditional use permit. If this passes, the only time that they will need to go through the process of a use permit is if that business goes out of business and somebody else tries to move in there. So what is actually getting solved by doing this? Because those trucking companies aren't just going to close down. They're going to already have their use permits. This doesn't seem to solve anything except that, we now may have, an additional 6 months to a year plus of vacancy added on to any vacant property while it goes through a use permit process, which is only going to lead to an increase in crime. Because I can tell you that when there are empty buildings around my building that stay empty for any period of time, my building gets broken into regularly. But as soon as there are tenants in there where there are more people present throughout the day, crime seems to suddenly drop.
I hear you. Thanks for those comments, Eric. And I do hear the concern about including Pell, and appreciate you offering those comments. And the purpose of the meeting is to collect those, and we'll ponder those some more afterwards. Thanks for joining. I appreciate you. I'm just going to do a time check here. We do have, I think, at least 6 or 7 other hands raised. I got 9 minutes left in our allocated meeting time. If I'm not able to get to every hand raised, which I'm doubtful of, be mindful of the Q&A. I see there are a number of questions in there. Pardon me. Please enter your questions if I haven't answered them already. That will be saved after this meeting, and we will be able to reflect on those afterwards. And again, if you'd like to talk further, you can reach out to me personally. I'll provide that contact info. What I'd like to do is get to the next hand. I see calling user 212-7473. Press star 9, and that should unmute you. Okay, calling user 916-212-7473. I've clicked allow unmute. Sorry, it's star 6 to unmute. Apologies. Press star 6. All right, I can see you're
Yes, can you hear me now?
I can. Good morning. Thank you for joining.
Yes, I would like to ask, with this ordinance, is it going to stop the vehicles from parking on the street, like these super trucks?
Okay, thanks for the question. The straight answer is no. This is an ordinance that would apply to private property, that would regulate the development of private property. Parking in the roadway is subject to separate provisions of city code and California law. Thanks for joining. Next, I'll move on to Adam Nabas.
Morning, Mr. Collin.
Good morning.
Everyone else on the call. Some individuals have brought up some great points earlier. some other business owners. I appreciate their comments. I'm speaking from a property owner, landlord perspective, and business owner. So we have purchased multiple properties in District 2, District 6, and other cities in California. And we favor Sacramento because of the permitted use that the M zoning has given us and allowed for us to operate our business. This M zoning allows us to rent our property without use permits, which, you know, it keeps our properties full, keeps the revenue coming in, keep taxes flowing to Sacramento. I completely oppose any new ordinance to have a use permit to allow these type of these activities. The vacancy rates will increase. It is not easy to get a use permit, and that might not even happen at all. And so what happens, you're going to have vacancies. You're going to have property owners that are taking losses, diminished values. I guess my first question is, if this is forced upon the property owners, is the city willing to take any precautions to protect landowners of lost income or vacancies?
That would not be a function of planning and zoning ordinances to do so, but I do hear your concern and your comments.
I've seen similar things. So let's talk about light rail platforms and M zone properties. If you take a look at all the light rail platforms in the city and the M properties that are surrounding that, the majority are vacant lots or vacant buildings that they can't get tenants or have any other businesses that are able to operate or conduct business because of that ordinance that's in place. And so that is a direct correlation of the city bringing in a new policy and diminishing value. I mean, you could pull those properties up, and I'm sure you're very intimate with that, sir. I completely oppose this ordinance change. And what is the formal way to oppose this?
Thanks for joining, Adam. So what I would ask is if you received the invitation for today, it may mean you're a property owner. You'll receive notice in the mail at the city council's meeting, whereby you can present your comments to the council prior to or during the meeting, indicate your position on the ordinance for those that are assigned to vote on it. So I'd ask that you please continue to participate. If you have any further questions, reach out to me. Let's see, I have time for maybe just one or two questions, depending on the duration. I see Rehorn Collision. I'm going to click allow to unmute.
Hello, Kevin.
Good morning.
Hey, some really great points have been brought up so far, and I'd really have to agree with Nick on that, how the use permit is going to accomplish anything when you already have an existing issue. And it sounds like we're really talking about the trucking industry, which I'm not in. I'm a business owner, property owner on Bell Avenue. And I hope to do some expansion, next year with an adjacent lot. But if I understand this correctly, I'd have to go through this use permit, which is going to add even more cost and possibly a year time frame to it. When directly across the street, I've got US Foods around the corner. I think it's base property, which is county, but there's 3 massive warehouse buildings. And whether between the city and the county, nobody addressed the freeway on-ramp, off-ramp at Winters, which is a disaster with all this truck traffic. But once again, we're just dealing with truck, and we're putting this blanket ordinance on that I'm not so sure is going to accomplish anything. I don't know if there's a process where some property, maybe you guys could look at it property by property and give some exemptions, or perhaps I think a lot of this stuff with the trucking could be addressed through code enforcement. I mean, I've worked and lived out here for 30 years, and this trucking thing is a big problem. these operators buy these lots, they just throw down some gravel and they operate. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue that's not a good idea, but we are doing this massive, I would call it a bureaucracy thing on legitimate business owners to address a problem that I think could be targeted in a much more efficient way.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate those comments. Thanks for joining us today. All right, I'll take one more, just one last comment. Top of my list is Sandra Anderson.
Good morning, Kevin. Thank you for taking our call.
Yeah, good morning.
Hey, how did the contractor yards and storage yards get lumped into what appears to be a trucking and vehicular issue? Is it just the unattractive, visually unattractive nature of a storage yard? And couldn't that be done more efficiently on a case-by-case basis?
Well, if I'm understanding your question, why was contractor storage yard included in the list?
Yes.
So there, in my observation in this city and others, there are different. There's certain characteristics of that particular land use which are common, in that they're generally open lots that have a perimeter, a barrier, fence, wall, and the like, and they store various pieces of equipment, which could be depending on the contractor for different scales or types of construction. But they do commonly include equipment that could involve the use of commercial trucks. It is not, I would admit, it's not the same as commercial truck storage, repair, or the like, where you don't have the long trailers, but you do have truck traffic that could come into those lots, and depending on the scale and the size of that operation, could be incompatible with residential use. There is a subtle difference. I do acknowledge that, but that's the general thinking, is that there could be, it's not that it's unsightly, but there could be traffic that relates to a commercial construction enterprise that is coming into that adjacency with a residence. But did you have anything else to add? I think we should.
Is there any way to refine that definition so it's just not a blanket for all contractors that, I understand large trucks, but there's a lot of us that do not have large trucks. It's just a storage facility for drywall and metal framing or whatever business you're in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're doing it right now, is that you're offering that observation and comment to myself and a concern. So we're here to hear it and consider that moving forward. And I think you're participating and letting us know what your thoughts are on that. And it is a draft. This is not an ordinance yet. It is in draft format, and it has not been adopted by council. So thanks for coming today and offering that opinion. We'll take it into consideration.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'm sorry, I do see 6 additional hands raised. I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to everybody in the time allotted. There are a number of questions. Thank you for entering those in the Q&A. Again, those are to be saved, and staff will review them after today's meeting. What I'd like to do is close with just a couple of slides. Today, we're concluding the virtual community meetings that have been requested by the council office and the Law and Legislation Committee. We will walk away from this meeting and review all of the questions and comments that have been presented to us and evaluate them and consider what, if any, adjustments or revisions to make to the ordinance. And then in terms of what happens next, this has been passed on by the Law and Legislation Committee, and it will go to City Council for consideration. We expect in early 2024, in the first quarter of that year, the beginning of the year. You will receive a notice in the mail of that hearing if you're a property owner. If you are not and you're here and would like to be engaged in the process moving forward, I would ask that you please send me an email. We do have a notification list that we're sending out via email of all public meetings. You can send me an email and ask to be included. I will do so. And then finally, if you have any further questions or comments you'd like to discuss this further, again, you can send me an email. You can also call. That is my direct line. It will ring my phone and I will reply to your call there. So I think with that, I will stop the screen share and say thank you for everyone who took the time out of their day to attend today's meeting. If you have any questions, please reach out. But otherwise, I hope you have a good rest of the week.